and Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. I'm Tim, joined today by JP, and these are our stories of today. Edward de Bono, one of Malta's greatest minds, has died. Prime Minister Robert Abela is saying that Malta is not going to back down on its defense of its sale of citizenship scheme. Hamrun Spartans will not play in the Champions League next season as UEFA upholds a previous suspension. A Maltese man has opened up about how his dream to set up green walls, green facades at his home has been dashed by red tape and a ban on snail pesticides. And restaurants are launching a 2 vouchers for the price of 1 scheme. Jay, a big story today.
Yeah, breaking last night.
Yeah, exactly. Edward de Bono, one of Malta's greatest thinkers,
has died, yes. Tributes have been pouring all over social media, from politicians to influencers to just the general public, paying their respects for the late great thinker and academic. Known as Malta's brain-thinking pioneer, he was renowned worldwide for his theories on lateral and creative thinking. He unfortunately died at the age of 88 last night. Edward de Bono was born in Valletta in 1993. He studied medicine at the University of Malta before gaining a scholarship to read in an MA in psychology at the prestigious University of Oxford. He later went on to obtain a PhD at the University of Cambridge. Quite a impressive career, but he is best known for his theories on creativity and planning, and he coined the term lateral thinking to describe a method of thinking outside the box. He was not renowned just in Malta, but worldwide for his theories and his philosophies. He also helped set up the Edward de Bono Institute for Creative Thinking and Innovation in Malta in 1992, and only last year was chosen by the Education Ministry to chair a think tank to develop proposals for the education system in the wake of COVID-19. Tim, you're quite familiar with Edward de Bono's work, I imagine?
Well, I'm aware of what he's done. So completely familiar, but basically his main concept, as you said, is lateral thinking, which is almost he tried to develop a science into the way people should think and the way to be creative, which was a bit controversial in the sense that people often think that creativity is something that you can't describe it, you can't explain it, it's just something that is. Whereas science is something that can be explained formally. He tried to use the scientific process to explain creativity and encourage people who may not think that they are creative or creative enough to actually delve into their brains and become creative using techniques, famous techniques such as the red hat and blue hat and the 6 hats approach, when there's a group of people who have to tackle a problem, but tackle it from different approaches, right? So like you wear 1 hat and everyone and starts thinking from that approach, and it's actually still a common approach that many businesses use, not just in Malta but around the world. And this is something that he developed in the 1960s. So the fact that we're still talking about it today just shows how incredibly relevant this man was, and hopefully, I suppose the one thing that he would be, displeased about is the fact that Malta's education system never really embraced his theories.
Quite a legacy, yes. No, I'm sure it will live on.
So moving on, Prime Minister Robert Abela yesterday mounted quite a strong defense of Malta's sale of citizenship scheme in the wake of yet another legal threat by the European Union. So the European Commission is threatening Malta that it will sue it in the European courts if it keeps its sale of citizenship scheme as it is. However, the Prime Minister is saying, look, this is a very transparent scheme with a very high rejection rate, somewhere around 40% of all applicants get rejected. But the principle in itself, which is that we as a nation have a right to decide who is Maltese and who isn't, is something that we should decide and not Brussels or anybody else. And there's an interesting debate because it cuts to the heart of European concepts of freedom of movement and national sovereignty. So if Malta loses this case, I suspect there will be quite a few repercussions. However, it's only fair, I think, that the Prime Minister is defending it. At the end of the day, the Maltese economy has been hit from all fronts. You have tourism, which literally stopped for a long period due to the pandemic. You have Moneyval and the FATF breathing down our necks over the financial services. You have the G7 countries now trying to impose minimum corporate taxation rates, and there's no way the Prime Minister is going to voluntarily scrap a scheme that's giving the country millions. It is what it is.
A lucrative revenue scheme, like you said, and Malta has been hit in several areas, meaning, it has to find ways as a country, as a small nation in Europe, the smallest nation in the EU, to generate revenue in some way or another. And this, like I said, the Prime Minister is defending this citizenship scheme. Moving on to our third story, now concerning Premier League champions Hamrun Spartans, who unfortunately won't be playing in next year's Champions League after a UEFA appeals body upheld a suspension relating to a case of match fixing back in 2012 and 2013. Back in the time, Hamrun Spartans were found guilty of match fixing, resulting in 2 members of the committee being suspended for being handed a permanent ban. A few years later, nowadays, Hamrun Spartans are now at the top of the Premier League. They won last year's division, and it seems like UEFA hasn't forgotten about this suspension, about this incident of match fixing, and has upheld the suspension, meaning that the current Premier League champions won't be able to compete in the Champions League next year. The Spartans took to Facebook in a statement saying how disappointed they were at the decision. And they said they were seriously considering an appeal before the Courts of Arbitration for Sports. If they choose, however, not to appeal, or if the judgment is upheld by UEFA, which seems to be the case because they've taken it so seriously and match fixing is a major issue, Hibernians, Hibs, will be eligible to participate in the Champions League instead of Hamrun Spartans. It would be quite a shame for a club like Hamrun Spartans, obviously, who invested heavily the past year in improving its facilities, its club, its players, bringing in some international names and going from a mid-tier table team to the best in the Premier League by a long shot. I think there is a lot of support to see them appeal the decision and hopefully make the Champions League to see how well they would vie given their new crop of players. But we'll just time will tell.
Yeah. Also, don't match fix on. I mean, that's
exactly.
That's the truth of it. It shows how UEFA really takes this seriously, and rightfully so, because match fixing, and if you allow it to flourish, it will destroy the sport entirely. So,
absolutely.
So yeah, it sounds harsh that it's something that they're being punished for something that happened years ago, but at the end of the day, like, if it wasn't a Maltese club, like, trying to look at it from an outsider's perspective, you do also understand the logic behind UEFA's decision. Moving on, Maltese man Russell Samut has opened up about the immense red tape behind a pretty innovative sounding scheme by the planning authority to set up green facades outside his home. So basically, earlier this year, the PA launched an initiative whereby it said it will refund people up to €10,000 if they plant pots and a green facade outside their homes. The whole point of it being to beautify Malta in kind of in the way that the stretch of road towards Marsa Hamrun bypass, there's a green wall there now. They try to incentivize people to do the same thing on their homes. This man, Russell Samut, said he was really inspired by it. He saw something similar in Paris and really wanted to do it in his own home, and he applied. However, he found out there was so much red tape, that they were really selective on which plants he could plant. He said that his proposals were deemed not diverse enough. They needed to be more. Some needed to be more succulent, but some not. And he said, okay, but how can I water them? If I water them too much, either some are going to die or some are going to drown. And if they die, then they're going to fine me for it. So there's all this red tape that in the end he said, look, memx tamel, I'm not applying for it. Then he said, okay, I'm going to do it anyway, but without the planning authority's help. And then wham, snail pesticides were banned.
Yeah.
And you were following the story about the snail pesticides. The reason they were banned, I think, was because animal activists were...
Exactly. So the snail pesticide were the Ministry for Animal Rights the other day, along with the Ministry for Environment, I believe it was last week, announced that there's been a ban on snail pesticides, which is great for animal activists and animal lovers and even pet owners, because as we know, notoriously in Malta, people tend to buy snail pesticide to poison animals on the street.
No, that's not, but I disagree with that argument, though.
It's true, no, because you see photos online of people planting pesticide in areas where there's stray cat colonies or people's pets. People get irritated.
But they can use other kinds of poison now, right?
Well, snail pesticide tends to be the go-to one for the stuff, and it was easy to buy as well. You could buy it over the counter. Now, with the new ban on snail pesticide, only authorized people like farmers can purchase it from stores. So, but yeah, no, it was great for animal activists, but obviously people like Russell Zamoud who are trying to take advantage of these green initiatives, it proved problematic for him. And moving on to our last story now concerning government vouchers, which recently launched last week. Restaurants are now going to launch a 2 vouchers for the price of 1 scheme, basically saying that people will be treated to an additional €15 as part of an initiative launched by the Association for Catering Establishments. So basically, if you go to a restaurant now and you spend at least €15 worth in government vouchers, you'll be given an additional €15 to spend at that establishment. So basically just trying to increase incentives for people to spend their vouchers and go out and invest in the local economy, invest in local businesses and local restaurants. I guess an idea, like you mentioned, tourism is a big part of our industry here. Restaurants have been hard hit over the past few months. So the ACE, along with the Economy Ministry and the Tourism Ministry, is really trying to incentivize people to spend their vouchers, to spend in the local economy, and are offering these kind of two vouchers for the price of 1 scheme. So you get an additional €15 if you spend at least €15 at a restaurant, which I think is a great initiative. Yeah. It really pushes people to go and spend money in local restaurants.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm holding on to my vouchers until I find out the list of these restaurants.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's obviously, you can get 2 meals instead of 1. So it's a no-brainer at the end of the day. So that's it for today, but stick around because we're going to have an exclusive interview with Joanne Bondin. Joanne Bondin is the president of the Malta Employers Association, and we're going to be discussing concepts such as the future of GDP and other pressing issues to the Maltese economy, and including issues such as taxation. So stick around after this interlude on Lovin Daily.
In Malta, we don't say.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. With me now is Joanne Bondin, President of the Malta Employers Association. Hi Joanne, thank you for accepting this interview. Good morning. So, the MEA is holding a conference, right? It's going to be discussing...
It's next week, yes.
Next week. What day?
It's on the 18th.
The 18th?
Yes, so Friday.
So next Friday, around a week from now. And one of the themes of this conference is going to be whether we should keep using GDP as the main indicator to determine how much our economy is growing. So can you explain this concept a bit, please?
Yes, of course. Basically, GDP in layman terms, in simple terms, is the measure that is used by countries to see and measure how people and the economy is going. So that is like the universal measure to tell us how a country is doing, what's the input, what's the output. And what we're saying now is that there is more to life, there is more to living, apart from GDP, to measure how people are feeling, so it's subjective, about living in a particular country.
But aren't those two different arguments, though? The GDP is about the economy.
Yes.
And what you're saying is how people enjoy life.
Yes.
Are they two different concepts, or should one replace the other?
I think it should build on each other, because you have the financial measure, and then you have also the quality of life of people. So what we're saying here is that, just to give a simple example, you go to work to earn a living, to earn money. But there is more to working than just earning money. It is how you feel about it and how you interpret that experience. So what we're saying here is that how can we measure, apart from monetary elements, but also the way of living, the way of experiencing life.
And how can we measure these things?
There are many ways and elements that we can measure, because what we're saying here is that life is not only made up of the monetary side, but it's also made up of the environment, the time we spend with our family.
But obviously the difference is that when you talk about monetary terms, you're talking about numbers and
tangible.
Exactly, tangible. and when you talk and in terms of quality of life, it's very subjective and very
Yes.
opinionated. So how are you going to measure these?
I think, first of all, it's important that you also get a feel of how people are feeling, they're actually feeling. When people, for example, move from one country to another, they don't only do it for monetary reasons. It might be a reason, but it's also the quality of life in that particular country. And it is the perception. It is being able to take walks, go in the country, be social, because that is one of the elements that Maltese experience. The distances are not that far, and we can also meet up with our friends without having plans. So how we measure that would be also conducting regular surveys and keeping a pulse on people, and also getting the general feel. When people are going through a hard time in a country or a very positive time, it's felt as well. But then we also need to measure by surveys, for example, or anything of that sort.
Like
that needs to be done.
Index. Kind of like a happiness index.
Yes, that could be, yes. It's done. It's done also at a European level, for example. But then each country will need to also keep a track of that and take a more holistic view.
But do you expect anything to change in practice as a result of this? So by knowing, okay, if let's say we say 60% of the Maltese people think, for example, there's too much construction going on, for example. I'm sure that these are some things that might emerge from these kind of surveys. Like, is anything going to change, or is it just going to be just another number that politicians start talking about to say, to boast about how they've improved the system?
Hopefully not, because that's why we're discussing this also in the conference. So what we're going to be doing in the conference would be, first of all, to get perception of different experts in the field. But apart from getting all that expertise, then we need to do something about it, like you're saying. So what we would need to do then is have a direction on what is important for our country. And that will direct us to have incentives that will push towards having a greener economy, having more work-life balance, for example. So that would give us direction to actually have tangible things that companies can implement from the employer side, and also it will impact also on the way of living of all the Maltese society.
I mean, but fair enough, but we know that the issue of that we need to go greener and that we need to be more digital, as in we've been talking about this for years. Somehow there seems to be some kind of resistance, or some wall, right, between proposing it and then the implementation side. The reason being is that by implementing it, you're going to annoy some players, right? And unfortunately, governments don't like stepping on people's toes, so they'd rather keep things as they are. So this is going to be a bit of of a pressing issue.
That's the challenge of it, because everyone will be like defending their own interests. However, what we're saying here is that it needs to also to be a national thing. We're saying, listen, we're not only solving the problem for today, but we're also solving the problem for longer term, for future generations, for our children, because that is where then well-being needs to be taken into consideration, because it's not just the now. And I think that this is something that requires a change of mentality. We need to be prepared not to think about gratification now, but also in the future.
Yeah.
That is the challenge.
That actually brings it on nicely to our next topic, which is this proposal, right, by the G7 countries of wealthy nations for a global minimum corporate tax rate of at least 15%. Obviously, Malta's is higher than that. That's some 35%. But we also have incentives that effectively lower the taxation rate and that make it the country attractive for foreign investors.
Yes.
So do you think Malta should, just go with the flow and say, look, the United States, the UK, France, they all want this, like there's no use fighting it, so might as well just join early on? Or do you think we should really mount a defense of our taxation system, despite these very influential countries calling for minimum taxation rates?
It is not as easy as having such a blanket approach, because a lot of foreign investment comes to Malta, as you rightly said, because of the attraction related to taxation. And if we remove that, that might be impacted largely, and that will also have ripple effects on jobs and on what we were saying before, the well-being. So it is not just saying, listen, let's just jump on board and take it over. We would need to see also the implications it will have long term. But rather than saying no, I think what we should do as a country would be to say, how can we still be attractive to foreign investment and to companies setting up without this taxation process? So we wouldn't depend on that only. But that would require, for example, saying, listen, our education is of a high level. How are we going to maintain that? So that companies can come also for other reasons. So it's also seeing other ways of how to attract such companies who are coming for the taxation right now, but can also come for other reasons in the future.
So basically defending the taxation level, but also making sure that just in case something happens, then we're not a completely unattractive country.
We don't have all eggs in one basket, basically.
Yeah, true. But in terms of the proposal itself, as in the government has yet to speak about it, like what do you think its position should be? Do you think it should try and make a case for like why small countries without many resources require this taxation flexibility?
I think that it was set up initially because it was required for a country, so certain elements of, let's put it that way, stating why we need it, and also considering our size and the dynamics that we have need to be put forward. But as I was saying before, we shouldn't really depend on that only. We should diversify how we can get investment.
But isn't the reality that Malta, at the end of the day, it's a tiny country and there's limits to how much we can diversify?
Yes.
Even in terms of space, right?
In terms of spaces, we need to go. Yes, we know the challenges that we have. However, I think that we need to be creative, and that is where maybe it's a bit challenging for our country. We need to think outside and not go around the same. Like, for example, getting investment on we're diversifying in AI and technology, so that will make us like a hub, which was also something that was worked on in the past, a hub for certain specializations, certain niches. And that will make us more relevant for some companies to come over.
Finally, one of the big problems that many businesses are facing at the moment, particularly in areas such as hospitality, is the lack of workers. And one of the main reasons behind this is that there were many foreign workers who left Malta during the pandemic. They were either left voluntarily or they were literally kicked out. And now that the sector is starting to recover, they found out that they don't have these workers, and sometimes they actually need to hire more than they had before to actually to cater for the new COVID-19 restrictions. So, first of all, do you think it's the fault of businesses and the government for just really treating these foreign workers like that and letting them go without even planning ahead for the time when they'll need them again? And just whatever, charity begins at home, they had said, get out. And now we're stuck. And what do you think how do you think we should react to the situation? Should bring more foreigners over?
Okay. First of all, from the experiences we had from COVID, I think that not all employers, majority of employers treated their employees and tried to keep them on even through hardship. There were investment from the government to keep on to keep the workers, and also from company side. So, and we were discussing this with our members. They were calling us and they were telling us, how am I going to keep the employees there even if my doors are closed? So I think it's important that we do not generalize on that, because the general feel was, both from the employer side and also the employee side, they worked to get through, the pandemic. In some cases, people had decided to go also back to work, back home, excuse me. And in that case, it could have been that also the skill that a company needed was also lost. So what we're finding right now is, as you rightly said, is that companies actually need people, but there's that lack of resources and skills. Getting foreign workers is necessary. I mean, it's necessary to keep the circle going, and it's also necessary for our economy to keep going. However, it's also important that we also see how we can get more skills that are not currently used. There are incentives, for example, for getting people, women, back to work. And there are also a niche of, for example, people who have retired who can actually be brought back into the workforce, because there are some legislative clauses that can easily be eliminated to get people from 61 to 65 back into hospitality, for example, or any other work which they can actually do.
Voluntarily, though, I suppose. Not about raising the retirement age.
No, there's a question, because they would need to choose if it's pensionable age, or else if they can get their pension. So basically there is that gap that if they choose to retire, they will not be able to work part-time or 10 hours, but even that 10 hours or 20 hours is beneficial for the gap that we have, especially, for example, if you have people who have a lot of experience in hospitality and they know how to give a very good service.
Yeah.
So I think we also need to see those other gaps. Going back to your question about foreign workers, I think that we also need to reduce the bureaucracy that it involves. I mean, keeping it within the parameters of safety. But there were a lot of improvements throughout the years, but I think that it needs to be facilitated more and also taken overall.
With Identity Malta and the whole long process of getting a work permit, right?
Yes, for example. But also in logistics, getting people from third country places around the world, third country nationals.
What do you mean? You have to the fact that you have to go to an agency to get...
For example, or else they have to coordinate their lodging here and come over, and it takes time. It's different than being in Europe.
And finally, what do you agree with a recent proposal by the new president of the Chamber of Commerce that companies should start looking at AI and issues like robot waiters to instead of hiring new people?
Okay. The shift from the human to the machine, let's put it that way, has been existing for a long period of time. It's just how we adapt it. I think that it is important that it is used where human resources are lacking, because it will make us more efficient and people can offer a higher level of work, of job, and use their mind more, So I think that there is a balance. What we would not need to lose out on is the human touch. And I think we should focus where the human touch is needed.
So you're not envisioning a Malta with just full of robot waiters and just replacing the physical ones then?
Not necessarily, but if we won't find waiters, we need to find a solution as well. So, you need a balance.
Joanne Bondin, thank you very much. Thank you for following Lovin Daily today. Make sure you follow lovinmalta.com for all the latest updates and have a day full of loving.